She found someone who made her feel seen. And she made me invisible. You know how people say cheating starts small? Like a smile that lingers too long. A text that lights up their face. A laugh that doesn't quite sound like the ones they give you anymore. That's how it started with Emma. We'd been married 8 years. No kids, but not for lack of trying. 2 miscarriages, the second one bad enough that we stopped bringing it up at family dinners. We were the kind of couple that didn't fight much, not because everything was perfect, but because we didn't want to make things worse. That's a dangerous kind of peace, I think. The kind that numbs you slowly. She met him at work. His name was Nate. IT guy. Quiet, a little awkward. Not the kind of man who threatens a marriage. But over time, I started hearing his name more and more in casual stories. Nate fixed my laptop again. He's a wizard with this stuff. Nate made the funniest joke today. I almost spit out my coffee. Nate told me about this podcast you'd actually like. Remind me to send it to you. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured if she was gonna cheat, it'd be with someone flashier. More confident. Nate looked like the kind of guy who apologizes before speaking in a meeting. I didn't feel threatened. I felt confused. But the mentions became daily. And then it wasn't just mentions, it was tone. Like the way she said his name came with an aftertaste. Like she had a private joke with him, and I wasn't part of it. One night, around midnight, I came back into the bedroom after grabbing water and saw her roll over quick and shove her phone under the pillow. She smiled, too fast, too wide. "Who were you texting?" I asked. She shrugged. "Just Abby, her best friend." But I saw the name before she hid the screen. Nate. The next morning, I checked the call log on our shared phone plan. There was a call from him. 48 minutes. At 11:12 p.m., I stared at the screen like it might apologize. Instead, it confirmed something I hadn't wanted to believe. She was lying. I didn't confront her right away. I wish I could say I did. But there's a kind of fear that comes when you realize your reality might not be real. I started watching more closely. Her phone was never out of reach. Even in the bathroom. She started smiling at texts she didn't show me. She laughed more when she was alone in the kitchen than when she was sitting across from me at dinner. One night, she fell asleep early. Her phone buzzed. Just once. I wasn't snooping. Not really. I told myself that as I leaned over and looked at the screen. It was a text from Nate. It said, "Thanks for talking me down again. You always know how to make me feel safe." Safe. I can't explain it, but that word made something crack open in my chest. I scrolled up. I read more. Pages of messages. Nothing sexual. Not even close. But God, it was worse. It was intimate. Emotional porn. Therapy sessions disguised as banter. Jokes about how no one really sees us like we see each other. Her telling him about the miscarriage, the guilt she still carried, the way I shut down emotionally. That one hit hard. Because I had shut down. But I didn't think she noticed. Or maybe I hoped she hadn't. She told him things she hadn't told me in years. At the end of one long thread, he replied, "Sometimes I think we're soulmates in the wrong lives." She didn't push back. She just said, "Yeah, sometimes I think that too." I stayed up that night staring at the ceiling. My wife was in love with someone else. And he hadn't even touched her. And the worst part? I couldn't even tell anyone. What was I supposed to say? My wife is cheating emotionally. No one throws punches over that. No one files for divorce because their partner had a really deep conversation. But I felt like I'd been gutted. I started pulling away. She noticed. Of course she noticed. She asked what was wrong. I told her I was tired. That work was stressful. She believed me. Or maybe she just wanted to. What do you do when the person who promised to be your home starts building a second one, brick by brick, in someone else's arms, but swears they're just being a good friend? I didn't know how to answer that yet. But I would. And when I did, it wouldn't be with words. For the next couple of weeks, I watched the life I thought I had shrink into something I didn't recognize. Emma was still kind. That's what made it harder. She still made my coffee in the morning. Still kissed me on the cheek before leaving for work. Still asked how my day was. But it all felt like muscle memory. Like she was going through the motions of being a wife, while her heart was somewhere else, with someone else. With Nate. I thought about confronting her a dozen times. I rehearsed it in my head. I even wrote a note once. I sat in my car during lunch and typed it out in the Notes app like a coward. I know about Nate. I know it's emotional, not physical, but it still hurts. I need you to be honest with me. I deleted it before I even started the car. Part of me still hoped it would burn out on its own. That she'd come to her senses. That maybe she just needed a friend, and it had gone too far emotionally, but she'd realize it. But that hope started dying the day I overheard her talking to him. It was a Sunday. She was in our home office, supposedly working on a report. I was passing by when I heard her laugh. It wasn't just the sound, it was the softness in it. The kind you only give to someone who makes you feel completely safe. Then her voice lowered. I couldn't catch the words, but the tone told me enough. Flirtatious. Familiar. Intimate. I stepped back and went into the garage. I stood there staring at the wall, my hands shaking for reasons I didn't understand. I wasn't the jealous type. Never had been. But jealousy is something different when it isn't based on insecurity, when it's based on evidence. A week later, I finally brought him up. Carefully. We were watching TV. Something forgettable. She was scrolling on her phone, smiling to herself, barely pretending to care about the show. I muted the TV. Hey, I said. Can I ask you something? She looked up, surprised. Sure. How close are you and Nate? Really? Her face changed. Just for a second. That flicker of panic quickly buried under a smile. He's just a friend. Why? I stared at her. Because it seems like you talk to him more than me lately. She frowned, defensive. That's not fair. I'm not trying to start a fight, I said. I'm just telling you what I see. She turned off her phone and set it down. He listens to me. That's all. He gets what I'm going through. You've been distant. There it was. The shift. From guilt to blame. I've been distant, I repeated, because I feel like I'm losing you and I don't know how to stop it. She didn't respond right away, just stared at the floor. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. I feel alone too, you know. Ever since the miscarriages, you've pulled away. We don't talk like we used to. We don't connect. I wanted to scream. Because she was right. And also so wrong. I know I pulled back, I said. But I never turned to someone else to fix it. She didn't say anything. So I asked the question I'd been choking on for weeks. Are you in love with him? Silence. No, she finally said. But her voice cracked. She wouldn't look at me. I care about him. A lot. But I'm not in love with him. That was the worst answer she could have given. Not a lie. Not the truth. Just enough to make me feel crazy for asking. I didn't push further. I think she expected me to. But I just stood up, walked into the kitchen, and stared at the sink like it might tell me what to do next. That night, she cried in bed. Quietly. I don't think she knew I was awake. I didn't hold her. 2 days later, I made a decision. I took the afternoon off work. Went to a coffee shop across the street from her building. Watched the glass doors like a hawk. At 4:17 p.m., I saw them walk out together. Her and Nate. They weren't touching. Nothing inappropriate. Just walking, talking, laughing like they had the world to themselves. I took a photo. Not because I needed evidence, but because part of me still didn't believe it until I saw it with my own eyes. I followed them. Just for a block. Just long enough to see her body language. The way she tilted toward him. The way she brushed her hair behind her ear when he made her laugh. That used to be my laugh. They went into a bookstore. I didn't follow. I sat in my car and stared at the steering wheel, feeling like someone had cut open my chest and left it exposed. This was real. I wasn't imagining it. Emma was in love with someone else. And she didn't need to sleep with him to betray me. Somewhere along the line, she started giving him the parts of her that used to belong to me. Her fears, her joy, her thoughts before bed. And me? I was just the man she lived with. A week after I saw them leave the bookstore together, I started sleeping in the guest room. There wasn't a big argument. No slam doors, no ultimatums. Just a slow, mutual silence that made it clear we were living parallel lives under the same roof. She didn't ask why. I didn't explain. We just adjusted. That's the thing about emotional affairs. They don't blow up. They erode. Like a leak behind the wall, slowly rotting the foundation until one day the whole thing just caves in. I catch glimpses of her on the couch, texting, always smiling, always with that soft look she never gave me anymore. Sometimes she'd laugh out loud and shake her head, as if she couldn't believe how lucky she was to have someone who got her. I started spending more time at work. Volunteered for projects I didn't want. Stayed late even when I didn't need to. Anything to avoid coming home to a woman who was still technically my wife, but no longer my person. Then something small happened. Insignificant on the surface, but it shifted something between her and Nate. Not enough to change the whole story, but enough for me to notice. It was a Saturday morning. She was getting ready to meet up with Nate and another coworker for brunch. Group setting, supposedly. I didn't ask questions anymore. But as she was getting ready, she stood in front of the mirror, frowning. "Do you think this top is too much?" she asked, smoothing down a light blue blouse she hadn't worn in years. I shrugged. "Looks fine." She turned slightly. "I just don't want it to seem like I'm trying too hard." That sentence hung in the air. "Why would it seem like that?" I asked carefully. She paused. "I don't know. Nate made a weird comment the other day. Said I always dress nicer when I know we'll be in the same meeting. Like I'm trying to impress him or something." I watched her face as she said it. She was trying to play it off, like it was nothing. But there was a flicker of discomfort there. Subtle, but real. "How did you respond?" I asked. She gave a short laugh. Told him not everything's about him. But the way she said it, defensive, a little tight, told me she hadn't liked the way it made her feel. Like for the first time, Nate had broken the unspoken rules of their connection. The safe space she'd built with him now had a crack in the wall. I didn't say anything, just nodded and walked away. That afternoon, when she got home, I noticed something different. She was quiet. Not upset, not angry, just unsettled. Like the version of Nate she'd built in her head didn't match the one who showed up across the table. A few days later, I saw the texts again. I wasn't looking for them. Her phone was on the kitchen counter while she was upstairs, and it lit up with a message preview. I didn't open anything. Just read the few lines on the lock screen. "Nate, sorry again if that thing I said came off weird. I was just teasing. You looked amazing, BTW." No reply from her. I waited. Hours passed. She never answered it. I didn't know what it meant. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. But it was the first time I'd seen her pause with him. That pause was small, but it mattered to me more than I'd admit. Meanwhile, we kept up the charade. We talked sometimes. Not about anything real. Groceries. Schedules. Bills. But I stopped trying to pull her back. I think some part of me finally understood she didn't want to come back. Not really. Not to the version of me she'd already said goodbye to in her head. One night, I made dinner. Pasta with roasted vegetables, one of the few meals we both used to like. I lit a candle. I don't know why. Some habit left over from a time when that used to mean something. She came home late, saw the food, and gave a tired smile. "You didn't have to do all this." I know. We ate in silence for a while. Then she looked up. "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. "Do you think I'm a bad person?" The question hit harder than anything she'd said before. "No," I said honestly. "I think you're a lost person. And I think you found someone who made you feel found. That's not the same thing." She stared at her plate for a long time. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, she said softly. I know. I never slept with him. I believe you. Another silence. This one heavier. She wasn't confessing. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She just needed someone to acknowledge that she was unraveling. And I did. But I didn't offer her a hand to hold anymore. A few nights later, I heard her crying again. Alone in the bathroom, door closed. She still hadn't replied to Nate's text. I knew, because I checked again. Somewhere in that tiny space between what they were and what they weren't, something had shifted. Not enough to undo the damage, but enough to remind her that even soulmates in the wrong lives can say the wrong thing. It didn't bring her back to me, but it made her stop running toward him, even if just for a moment. And that moment? It was the first real crack in their story. She didn't realize I stopped loving her the day I heard her laugh at his texts louder than anything I'd said in months. It happened on a Wednesday. Midweek always brought out the worst in both of us, too far from the weekend to be relaxed, too deep into the routine to fake anything convincingly. We were like two actors stuck in a play we didn't believe in anymore, hitting our marks, delivering our lines, going home to separate dressing rooms. That morning started like the others. Cold coffee, quiet brushing of teeth, the usual unspoken tension in the hallway as we passed each other without touching. Emma was wearing that same blue blouse again. The one from brunch. The one she'd hesitated over. I didn't say anything, but I noticed. She left before I did. I watched her car back out of the driveway from the kitchen window. Then I stood there for a long time, staring at my own reflection in the glass. I looked tired. Not just physically, tired in the kind of way that settles into your bones. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. I went to work, faked my way through meetings, ate lunch at my desk. Around 3 p.m., I got a text from her. Staying late for a team happy hour. Don't wait up. No, love you. No emoji. Not even a period. I stared at the message for a long time. My thumb hovered over the screen. Then I locked the phone and slid it into my drawer. That night, I sat alone in our living room. The TV was on but muted. Some mindless show we used to watch together. The wine bottle was half empty before I even realized I'd opened it. The couch cushion next to me was perfectly indented from years of shared nights that no longer happened. It was around 10 p.m. when I heard the garage door. She came in, a little flushed, coat draped over her arm. Her eyes looked glassy, not drunk, just distant. Hey, she said, kicking off her shoes. Hey. She walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, stood there staring like she didn't know what she was looking for. I didn't move. Then she said it. Guess who showed up late to happy hour? I already knew. Nate, she said, laughing lightly. He always says he doesn't like those things, but then he shows up anyway. He's such a dork. Something in me went quiet. It wasn't the story. It wasn't the smile. It was the ease. The comfort in her voice when she said his name. The automatic way she filled me in like I was her roommate, not her husband. Like I should be in on the joke, when I was the punchline. I sat there watching her talk about this man like he was her person, and something finally broke. I stood up. Not angrily. No shouting. No throwing things. I just stood, and she stopped mid-sentence. What's wrong? I shook my head slowly. I can't do this anymore. She blinked. Do what? This. Us. Or whatever's left of us. She looked like I'd slapped her. Are you seriously doing this now? I should have done it months ago. The words felt foreign in my mouth, like I was hearing someone else say them. But they were mine. For the first time, they were mine. I've been sitting here every night, pretending like you're still trying, I said. But you're not. And I don't blame you for falling for someone else. I don't even hate you for it. I'm tired. She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. You came home tonight, and the first thing you did was tell me a story about him. You didn't even ask how my day was. That's not fair. It's the truth. She looked down. Her shoulders fell. I didn't mean to hurt you. I know. Silence. Then I said the part that finally made it real. I don't want to keep being the guy you feel guilty coming home to. She looked up, and for the first time in a long time, her eyes filled with tears. Real ones. Is this really what you want? She whispered. I looked around the room. At the cold dinner still on the stove. At the empty wine glass. At the hollow life we'd spent years building around silence and denial. No, I said. But it's what I need. She didn't fight me. She didn't beg. She just stood there, frozen in the middle of the kitchen, like she'd finally heard the same thing I had, the sound of something ending. Later that night, I packed a bag. Not everything. Just enough. I didn't slam the door when I left. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't have to. Because when someone slowly replaces you in your partner's life, you don't get a clean ending. You just disappear by degrees until you finally hear yourself say, enough. I moved into a furnished apartment downtown. Nothing special, but clean, quiet, and, more importantly, mine. I didn't tell many people. Just my brother and one close friend at work. No big social media announcement. No explanations. People assume divorce means screaming and lawyers. But this wasn't that. This was just over. Emma stayed in the house. She didn't ask me to come back. She didn't say we should try counseling. And I didn't offer. After the initial shock wore off, she settled back into her life with practiced grace, like a bird that had already grown used to flying with one wing. We had a few short conversations over the following weeks. Logistics, bank stuff, bills, some papers we had to sign. Every time we talked, she sounded more like someone I used to know. Polite. Distant. Like I was a former colleague she still had to CC on emails. I didn't ask about Nate. But I knew. 3 weeks after I left, I ran into one of her coworkers, Melissa, at a coffee shop near my new place. She looked surprised to see me, then did that awkward, I heard something but don't want to say it unless you say it first, smile. We talked for a minute, small talk about weather, work, whatever. Then I asked how things were going at the office. She hesitated just long enough. Oh, same old. Emma's still her usual self. She and Nate had been spending a lot of time together on that product launch. I nodded. Didn't flinch. Melissa looked down at her coffee. She mentioned you moved out. I'm sorry. You guys always seemed solid. I smiled, a small one. Just enough to be polite. We were. Until we weren't. That was the last thing I said before walking out. I kept myself busy. Work. Mostly. I threw myself into it, not because I suddenly became ambitious, but because it gave me a structure. Deadlines. Meetings. Expectations I could actually meet, unlike in my marriage. I started going to the gym again. Not to reinvent myself. I wasn't trying to do the cliché divorced man glow-up thing. I just needed to feel my body do something. To sweat. To ache from something other than guilt. I started cooking again. Badly, at first. But it felt good to make my own meals, pick my own groceries, choose my own music while chopping onions. I could listen to anything I wanted. I didn't have to pretend to like indie folk anymore. I started sleeping better. No more waiting for the light under the bathroom door to go dark. No more lying awake wondering who she was texting. But I'd be lying if I said it was all clean. Because even as the days passed and the air in my apartment started to smell like me instead of us, I still checked her Instagram every few days. She hadn't blocked me. Just didn't post much. A few photos of her dog. A photo from a weekend hike. One blurry group shot from a patio bar, captioned, "Much needed reset." Nate was in the corner. Not tagged. But he was there. I stared at his face longer than I should have. Not because he looked happy, he didn't, but because I couldn't stop wondering what he thought he'd won. Emma still hadn't replied to his last text when I left. I knew that because the day I moved out, she left her phone on the counter while she was upstairs. I saw the screen light up. Nate, so are we still doing this? Or was it just a moment? I never saw her reply. But clearly, something had continued. One night, I got a message from her. No subject, just one sentence. I don't know if I made a mistake. I stared at it for a long time. Didn't answer. A few days later, another one. I keep thinking about what you said, about how I gave him the parts of me that used to be yours. This time I replied, you didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. We both did. She didn't respond. But a week later, I heard from Melissa again, this time a message on LinkedIn of all places. Friendly, random. She mentioned that Emma had taken some time off work. Burnout, she called it. I didn't ask any follow-up questions. But I wondered. I wondered if things with Nate didn't go the way she thought they would. If she started to see the cracks she never let herself see before. Maybe that weird comment about her clothes kept echoing in her head. Maybe he didn't turn out to be the safe harbor she expected. Or maybe she just missed the version of herself she had when we were still trying. None of that changed anything. Because here's the truth people don't tell you. When emotional cheating ends, it doesn't implode. It just runs out of air. One person pulls away. The attention fades. The high gets dull. The secret stops feeling romantic and starts feeling like weight. And when that happens, they start looking around for what they lost. Sometimes they look back at you. But by then, you've already learned how to live without needing to be looked at. It was late November when I got the call. I was in the middle of folding laundry towels, I think, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Normally, I wouldn't answer. But something made me pick it up. A woman's voice, shaking. Is this Daniel Price? Yes. I'm calling from St. Vincent's. Your wife Emma was brought in about an hour ago. She was in a car accident. My heart stopped. Just for a second. She's stable now, the nurse continued, but she listed you as her emergency contact. You were the only one. That part hit me harder than the rest. The accident wasn't life-threatening, but it was bad. Black ice. A curved exit ramp. Her little blue sedan skidded straight into a concrete divider. Her airbags deployed, but the force fractured her ribs, broke her left wrist, and left deep bruising across her chest and hip. She was lucky to be alive. I found her in a hospital bed, hooked up to IVs, face pale and swollen, her hair matted down on one side. She didn't see me at first. Her eyes were closed. There was no one else in the room. No family. No friends. And definitely no Nate. I pulled a chair close and just sat. 15 minutes passed before she stirred. When her eyes opened and landed on me, her breath caught. Daniel. Hey. She blinked hard, and I saw it. The panic, the disbelief, the shame. She tried to sit up, winced, gave up. I didn't know who else they'd call, she whispered. It's okay. I didn't want to bother you. It's okay, Emma. She looked away, tears pooling in the corners of her eyes. I was alone in the ambulance. I thought maybe Nate would come. I called him, but she didn't finish the sentence. I didn't need her to. He didn't show up. She built this emotional world around him, trusted him, confided in him, leaned on him, and when it actually mattered, he disappeared. He probably had a reason, she said quickly, almost to herself. He said he was bad with this kind of stuff. Hospitals and emergencies. I didn't say anything, because I wasn't here to attack him, or to make her feel worse. I was here because she was hurt, and because, for better or worse, I still had decency left in me. I'm just glad you're okay, I said quietly. She looked at me for a long time. Why are you here, Daniel? The question wasn't hostile. It was fragile, honest, and I surprised myself with the answer. Because you would have done the same for me, I said. Or at least, the version of you I married would have. She didn't speak. And I didn't ask for her apology. Because I wasn't owed one. That's the hardest thing to admit after betrayal, that sometimes closure isn't about hearing sorry. It's about realizing you can live without it. I stayed the night. Slept in the chair next to her. Got up twice to help her adjust the oxygen line when the nurse didn't come fast enough. helped her sip water when her hand was too weak to grip the cup, listened when she started crying quietly around 3 a.m., too tired to hold it in. Not because I loved her, but because I used to. She was discharged 2 days later. No one else came. No one offered to take her home. So I did. I drove her back to that same house, the one I'd left weeks earlier, with a duffel bag and a gut full of heartbreak. It looked the same, but colder somehow. No porch light on. No warmth behind the windows. Just a place someone lived in alone, even when they weren't technically alone. I carried her bag inside. She stood by the doorway, watching me like she didn't know how to say what she wanted to say. "Mate still hasn't come by," she said finally. I didn't respond. I don't know. I think he was only good at being there for me when nothing was really wrong. I nodded slowly. Some people are like that. She looked up, eyes red-rimmed and tired. "You're not." I smiled, but it didn't reach all the way. "No," I said. "I'm not." I turned to leave. She stopped me. Can you maybe come by again? Just for a little while?" "Not because I deserve it. Just because." Her voice broke. I don't know who else would. That moment, that right there, was when I understood the difference between love and obligation. Between compassion and codependence. Between the man I used to be and the one I was now becoming. I put a hand on the doorknob. "I'll check in on you. But I'm not coming back, Emma." She nodded slowly. A tiny, broken nod. She didn't beg. She didn't collapse. She just watched me go, finally understanding something I'd known for a while. We don't just leave people. We watch them stay gone. A month passed. Emma recovered slowly. A fractured wrist takes time, but it was the emotional bruises that lingered longer, not just from the accident, but from the quiet collapse that followed. I kept my promise. I checked in a few times, brought her groceries once, replaced a light bulb in the kitchen. Nothing dramatic, just small gestures to help her stand back up. I didn't do it for her. I did it because that's who I am. Eventually, I stopped going by. She was on her feet. She could drive. She didn't need me. And more importantly, I didn't need her anymore either. Something had shifted in me. I could feel it in the way my chest didn't tighten every time I passed a familiar place. I could hear it in my voice, steadier, lighter. I laughed more. I slept through the night. I stopped checking her socials. At some point, I even stopped thinking about Nate. Until he came back. It was a Wednesday again. There's something about Wednesdays with Emma, like the middle of the week was always her pivot point. Melissa texted me out of nowhere. "FYI, Nate showed up at the office today. They went for lunch." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. But later that night, curiosity got the better of me. I drove past the old house. Her car was in the driveway. So was his. It was stupid. I know. I wasn't trying to catch them. I wasn't jealous anymore. But there was a part of me that needed to see it. Not to confirm anything, but to close the loop. I didn't stay long. Just long enough to see the living room lights flicker on. A shadow moved behind the curtain. His, I think. Then hers, closer to him. That was enough. I drove home and didn't look back. Here's what I think happened. Nate didn't disappear after the accident. He paused. Maybe he got scared. Maybe he didn't want to play the role of savior when the fantasy cracked. But then, weeks later, he reached out again. Probably with some careful version of "I made a mistake." And Emma, being who she is, opened the door. Maybe she believed him. Maybe she needed to. Maybe she just didn't want to be alone anymore. That's the thing about some people. They'll always circle back. Not because they love you, but because they want the version of you that loved them. The soft place to land, the ego boost, the safe harbor when everything else goes cold. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I wasn't even surprised. Emma was Emma. And Nate? He was exactly who I thought he was. A few weeks after that, I met someone. Her name was Claire. We were both waiting in line at the DMV, grumbling about how slow everything was. I made a joke. She laughed. Then we ended up sitting next to each other while filling out paperwork. 30 minutes later, we were sharing a coffee down the street. She was smart, grounded, not in a hurry to impress me, and not interested in playing games. I told her, early on, that I'd just been through something heavy. She nodded, said, "Yeah, I've had my version of that too," and didn't press further. We took it slow, but something about her made me feel peaceful in a way I hadn't felt in years. No drama, no second-guessing, just quiet, steady presence, like breathing fresh air after years in a sealed room. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't wondering who she was texting. I wasn't hoping to be chosen over someone else. One morning, months later, I got another message from Emma. It was short. "You were right. I just didn't want to believe it." No follow-up. No explanation. I didn't reply, because by then, I was holding Claire's hand across a breakfast table, smiling at nothing in particular. She looked up and asked what I was thinking. I said, "Nothing." But that wasn't true. I was thinking about how sometimes the most painful endings are also the most necessary. How love isn't about grand declarations or late-night rescues. It's about who shows up when no one's watching, who listens when you're not speaking, who helps you heal without needing to be the hero, and how some people only miss you once you stop waiting to be missed. When you stop waiting for someone to come back, you finally remember how to move forward. Thanks for watching. If this story pulled you in, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss the next confession. Until next time, take care and watch who you trust.